Friedrich Nietzsche, one of the most radical and influential philosophers of the 19th century, in his early work The Birth of Tragedy from the Spirit of Music, 1872, attempted to understand the origins of European culture through the lens of ancient Greek tragedy. Written at the age of 27, this work combines philosophy, aesthetics, and art history, and is often considered essential for understanding Nietzsche's subsequent thought. The central theme of the book is the opposition of two fundamental principles that shape culture, the Apollonian and the Dionysian. The Apollonian principle, according to Nietzsche, is associated with form, harmony, clarity, and individual beauty. It is expressed in sculpture, where humans and the world acquire defined, fixed outlines. Apollo symbolizes the rational and ordered aspect of human experience, a drive for symmetry, control, and wholeness. In tragedy, the Apollonian manifests in choreography, the harmony of stage action, and the clear structure of the plot, which creates an illusion of order and beauty. The Dionysian principle, in contrast, is linked with ecstasy, the dissolution of individual boundaries, fusion with nature, and collective experience. Dionysus symbolizes chaos, passion, irrationality, musical ecstasy, and the intuitive perception of the world. The Dionysian manifests in Greek tragedy through music, choral singing, and ritual elements capable of immersing the audience in a transcendent experience of unity with life and death. It is precisely the Dionysian element that allows tragedy to reveal the depths of the human soul, its suffering and joy, combining terror and pleasure. Nietzsche's central idea is that the greatest achievements of ancient Greek culture, the tragedy and, more broadly, the entire range of classical Greek artistic forms, emerged from the combination of the Apollonian and Dionysian principles. Tragedy, in his view, represents a synthesis of these forces. The form and structure of the Apollonian are united with the emotional and collective power of the Dionysian. This synthesis enabled Greek culture to create works that captivate the mind while touching the deepest layers of feeling, allowing humans to comprehend the tragic dimension of existence. Nietzsche criticizes the subsequent development of Greek culture, particularly the philosophy of Socrates, for overemphasizing the rational at the expense of the Dionysian. Socrates, according to Nietzsche, symbolizes the beginning of rationalization, in which knowledge and logic displace mystical and emotional experience. The rise of philosophy, scientific thinking, and critical rationality led to the decline of tragedy and, more broadly, to the gradual degradation of cultural experience, in which humans no longer experience joy and terror as a unified whole. In this critique of Socrates, Nietzsche sees the origin of Western metaphysical tradition, which places reason above life, structure above flow, and the illusion of order above lived experience. Nietzsche pays particular attention to music as Dionysian art, capable of conveying the depth of life force and ecstasy. Music, unlike dramatic action, does not require a defined form or plot. It speaks directly to the emotions, dissolves individual boundaries, and creates a sense of collective unity. It is the musical aspect of tragedy that makes it unique and unparalleled as an art form. Nietzsche also views the works of Richard Wagner as a modern attempt to revive the Dionysian spirit in art, although he later distances himself from Wagner, arguing that his later operas over-idealize the Apollonian and overly politicize art. Another crucial theme in The Birth of Tragedy is the concept of catharsis. Nietzsche interprets catharsis not merely as the cleansing of the emotions through fear and pity, as Aristotle proposed, but as an experience of life force, an awareness of the tragic nature of existence, and the capacity to simultaneously rejoice and suffer. Tragedy, according to Nietzsche, allows humans to confront terror and suffering without destroying themselves, instead transforming and strengthening their spiritual and emotional life. The book also explores questions of metaphysics and culture. Nietzsche views the Apollonian and Dionysian as deep-seated forces manifesting in the history of culture, art, and philosophy. He sees tragedy as the pinnacle of the harmony of these principles, in which humans are able to comprehend the contradictions of existence, embrace its chaos, and yet give it form and meaning. In this context, Nietzsche introduces the idea of natural tragic wisdom, which allows humans to view life without illusions, recognizing suffering as an inherent part of existence. Although The Birth of Tragedy was criticized by Nietzsche's contemporaries, particularly in academic circles, it had a profound influence on subsequent philosophy and aesthetic thought. Ideas about the Dionysian and Apollonian, about tragedy and aesthetic experience, inspired thinkers such as Martin Heidegger, Jean-Paul Sartre, and Mikhail Bakhtin. The concept of the synthesis of the Apollonian and Dionysian also influenced 20th-century aesthetic theory, particularly ideas concerning the dialectic of form and content, reason and intuition, and the rational and irrational in art. An especially notable feature of Nietzsche's approach is the combination of philosophical analysis with cultural and historical investigation. He does not confine himself to abstract reflections on good and evil or the essence of art but seeks to reconstruct the cultural conditions that led to the flourishing of tragedy. He examines mythology, rituals, music, and dramatic works as expressions of deeper cultural energies. This interdisciplinary combination of philosophy, aesthetics, and history makes The Birth of Tragedy a unique work, readable both as a philosophical treatise and as a cultural study. In conclusion, The Birth of Tragedy is not merely a treatise on ancient Greek culture, but a profound investigation into human nature and artistic experience. Through the analysis of the Apollonian and Dionysian principles, Nietzsche proposes a philosophy of life that acknowledges the contradictions and tragedy of existence while striving for synthesis, harmony, and the fullness of experience. Tragedy, in his interpretation, is not only a theatrical art form but also a metaphor for human life, encompassing joy and suffering, order and chaos, reason and intuition. Although many of Nietzsche's ideas provoked controversy, it is in The Birth of Tragedy that the key elements of his philosophy first emerge, laying the groundwork for his later works, including his critique of morality, cultural analysis, and the concept of the eternal return. Thus, The Birth of Tragedy remains a foundational work for understanding not only Nietzsche's philosophy but also the broader context of 19th-century European aesthetic and cultural thought. Its significance lies in showing how art can reflect the profound forces of human nature, how tragedy can be a source of wisdom and strength, and how the synthesis of chaos and form produces a truly aesthetic and philosophical experience.